مرحبا، معكم الكاتبة رشا بركات، معدة ومقدمة برنامج صالون رشا عبر بودكاست حركة الشبيبة اليافية. صالون رشا رح يكون صالون مفتوح لكل أنواع العناوين المحلية والعالمية واللي أكيد بتفيدنا. اسمعونا على منصات التواصل الاجتماعي والتطبيقات سبوتيفاي، بودبين، جوجل وأبل، وطبعا على الفيسبوك بصفحتي بودكاست حركة الشبيبة اليافية وحركة الشبيبة اليافية. صالون رشا. Hello listeners of my Salon Russia via Youth podcast. I would like to introduce you an interesting book called Mountain Against the Sea, Essays on Palestinian Society and Culture, written by Salim Tamari. Salim Tamari is professor of sociology at Birzeit University, Palestine, and director of the Institute of Jerusalem Studies, as well as editor of its journal, the Jerusalem Quarterly. As it is written about the book called Mountain Against the Sea, this groundbreaking history of modern Palestinian culture is particularly refreshing because it goes beyond the usual focal point of the 1948 war to address the formative period that preceded it. Drawing on previously unavailable biographies of Palestinians, including Palestinian Jews, Salim Tamari offers 11 vignettes of Palestine's cultural life in the momentous first half of the 20th century. He brings to light the memoirs, diaries, letters, and other writings of 6 Jerusalem intellectuals whose lives spanned and defined the interwar period of 1918 to 1948. A musician, a teacher, a former aristocrat, a doctor, a Bolshevik revolutionary, and a Jewish novelist. Taken together, these essays present an integrated cultural history that illuminates a defining moment in the modern social history of the Arab East, the formulation of the Arab Enlightenment. Mountain Against the Sea charts the divide between the mercantile coastal communities and the mountain culture of smallholding peasantry, a breach that would widen as the region entered the capitalist economies and European and Mediterranean trade networks. The book also points to the creation of a new urban identity in Jerusalem, emerging through cultural interaction with a network of cities, Cairo, Alexandria, Jaffa, Damascus, and Beirut. Written by a leading Palestinian sociologist and Jerusalem expert, Mountain Against the Sea offers a vital and original contribution to our understanding of Palestinian history and culture. What an interesting and important book I have now, which called Mountain Against the Sea, Essays on Palestinian Society and Culture. Thank you, Salim Tamari. You can read in the introduction as follows. The chapters in this volume address 2 main themes. The first part of the book provides an interpretation of social changes common to contemporary societies of the Eastern Mediterranean. These changes include the emergence of a cultural divide between mercantile coastal communities and mountain-dwelling smallholder peasants. This divide became more tangible precisely when the two regional economies became more capitalized and more integrated with European and Mediterranean trade networks, thus enhancing the culture's difference. The book also addresses the relationship between village communities and the urban centers that have dominated them in the recent past through absentee landlordism. The ethnography of proto-nationalism and the emergence of a small town milieu as a backdrop to a reactive ideology of particularistic localism and a more recent ideology of religious triumphalism. This religious ideology emerged after the military encirclement of the PLO in Lebanon in the 1980s, and since then it has begun to replace the tradition of urban liberalism that emerged with the Ottoman reforms and during the British Mandate period, and the secular nationalism that marked Palestinian and Arab political culture for most of the 20th century. The second part of the book contains biographies of members of the Jerusalemite intelligentsia at the turn of the 20th century. These illuminate a critical watershed in the modern social history of Palestine, and indeed the whole Arab East, the moment when the reading public, through mass literacy, public schooling, and the daily press, articulated the ideas of the Arab Enlightenment of the late 19th century. Most of these biographies are of a number of public intellectuals who left their mark on the way Palestinians thought about themselves and their relationship to the patrimony of a disintegrating multinational state. Virtually all of those intellectuals were males as well as members of a rising professional and mercantile class that acquired national prominence during the Mandate period. Each whose biography appears here exemplifies an aspect of Palestine, and in a few cases Arab, modernity in an unanticipated manner. The radical pedagogue Khalil Sakakini revolutionized the study of Arabic and its grammar in a way that made it accessible to new generations of children trained in public schools. Already in his 1907 journalistic writings, he had created a language that had begun to erode the gulf between the spoken and written language. It was crisp, intimate, and free from the ornamental elaborations of 19th century Arabic, which had confined the written language to a small circle of literati and state functionaries. Omar Saleh al-Barghouti bridged the two eras of Ottoman decentralization and Arab independence movements. His History of Palestine, published on the eve of the Mandate 1921, utilizes a historical vocabulary and a current geography in which the country was still half anchored in Greater Syria. Dear listeners, I would like you really to read this book, Mountain Against the Sea, Essays on Palestinian Society and Culture, written by Salim Tamari and published by University of California Press in Berkeley. Dear listeners, I would like to thank you for listening. This episode is almost finished for today. You can also listen to all our programs on podcast, Yafa Youth Podcast, via Podbean, Spotify, Apple, Google, and of course Facebook. Yafa Podcast, Yafa Youth Podcast, and Yafa Movement, Yafa Youth Movement, also on Instagram, Yafa Youth Podcast. I would like to thank you again. See you soon in Salon, Russia.